The cell reeked of ozone and despair, but Clive's fingers never stopped moving. Chained to the cold metal wall of the Empire station, he tapped out rhythms against his thigh, his calloused fingertips dancing across an imaginary fretboard. The harsh fluorescent light caught the scar on his left cheek as he tilted his head, listening to the Empire's latest broadcast echoing through the corridors. "Citizens of Earth," the mechanical voice droned, "your planet's communications violate Imperial Protocol 7 Alpha. Submit to annexation within 72 standard hours or face systematic orbital bombardment." Clive's intense blue eyes sparked with defiance. His shoulders, usually relaxed in that performer's slouch, straightened as he reached into his boot with his free hand. The small transmitter, smuggled in by a sympathetic guard, felt warm against his palm. "Like hell," he muttered, his voice low and melodic despite the edge of steel. On Earth, 3 sectors away, Missy hunched over her equipment in the underground bunker. Her sharp gray eyes darted between flickering monitors as her fingers danced over the controls of her worn audio device. The auburn hair tucked behind her ears trembled with each micro-adjustment she made to the signal boosters. "Come on, Clive," she whispered, her confident stance wavering for just a moment. "Give me something to work with." The first notes crackled through the static, a haunting melody that seemed to carry the weight of every song humanity had ever sung. Clive's voice, rough from captivity but unbroken, began to weave through the instrumental, his words more felt than heard. "Stay away from Earth, you mechanical souls. We are more than the sum of your protocols. In every note lives 1,000 years. Of laughter, of sorrow, of hopes and fears." Missy's hands moved with precision, born of desperation, amplifying the signal, routing it through hidden relays she'd spent months installing. Her jumpsuit pockets clinked with tools as she leaned forward, every muscle in her wiry frame focused on one goal: getting Clive's warning heard. Across the galaxy, on mining colonies and agricultural stations, alien workers paused. The Zephyrian dock hands tilted their elongated heads, their gill slits fluttering with curiosity. The Christine engineers of Proxima Station found their mandibles chattering in uncharacteristic rhythm. Even the hulking Gorvac loading crews stopped their eternal hauling to listen. In his cell, Clive grinned, that lopsided smile that had charmed audiences across 3 continents. He could feel it working, could sense the ripples spreading through the Imperial communication network. His music wasn't just sound, it was humanity distilled into pure emotional frequency. The alien overseer's multifaceted eyes glittered as they processed the breach in their security. Standing 7 feet tall in the observation deck above Clive's cell, their dull green carapace shifted subtly, bioluminescent joints pulsing with growing irritation. "Silence that creature," they hissed to the nearest guard, their mandibles clicking in sharp staccato bursts. "Its noise pollutes our frequencies." But the guard hesitated. For the first time in their service, they felt something stirring in their thoracic cavity, a sensation the Empire had no protocol for. The human's voice seemed to reach through their auditory processors and touch something deeper, something that remembered a time before the Empire's rigid order. Back in the bunker, Missy's technician assistant, a lanky man with prematurely gray hair, looked up from his repairs with worry creasing his angular features. "Missy, they're trying to trace the boost signal. I'm reading Imperial scanner sweeps." "Let them try," Missy replied, her gray eyes never leaving her screens. She'd been planning for this moment ever since Clive was captured. Every redundant relay, every hidden transmitter, every line of code she'd embedded in the Empire's own systems, all of it leading to this defiant symphony. On a forgotten mining asteroid, a small, furred creature crouched in the shadows of the communications array. The alien sympathizer's luminous eyes reflected the pulsing lights of the receivers as Clive's music washed over them. Their whiskers trembled, not with fear this time, but with recognition. This music spoke of something they'd never experienced, but always yearned for: freedom. Clive's voice rose in the chorus, his words carrying across light years of space. "We are the species that dreams in music. That builds symphonies from chaos. Stay away from Earth, Empire of Silence. Or learn why harmony conquers discord." The symphony was more than a warning. It was a declaration of war fought with melodies instead of missiles, with passion instead of plasma cannons. As the final notes echoed through his cell, Clive leaned back against the cold metal wall, his blue eyes fixed on the observation window where the alien overseer watched. His tapping fingers never stopped their rhythm. The symphony had been broadcasting for 6 standard hours, and the Empire was beginning to notice. In the sterile halls of Command Station Apex 7, Admiral Vextar's scaled hide rippled with annoyance as reports flooded in from across the outer colonies. "Production on Mining Colony 447 has decreased by 12%, one aide reported, their voice a mechanical rasp. "Workers are humming." "Humming?" Vextar's 4 eyes narrowed to slits. "The frequency appears to be infectious, Admiral. It spreads through proximity contact." Meanwhile, in her hidden bunker on Earth, Missy worked with the focused intensity of someone defusing a bomb, which, in many ways, she was. The Empire's scanner sweeps were getting stronger, more precise. Her technician assistant muttered curses under his breath as he rerouted power from secondary systems. "This is insane, Missy," he grumbled, his grease-stained hands dancing over exposed circuitry. "They've got half the Imperial fleet looking for us." "Good," Missy replied, her fingers never pausing on her audio device. "Means Clive's getting their attention." She'd been refining the signal all night, stripping away extraneous frequencies, amplifying the emotional resonance that seemed to affect alien physiology in ways the Empire hadn't anticipated. Her sharp gray eyes caught something in the readouts that made her heart race. The signal was being retransmitted by alien receivers, bouncing from colony to colony without any input from Earth. "It's self-propagating," she whispered in awe. Back on the Empire station, Clive endured his 3rd interrogation of the day. The alien overseer loomed over him, their bioluminescent joints flaring with frustration as they clicked their mandibles in increasingly rapid patterns. "Your acoustic emissions are disrupting Imperial operations," the overseer hissed. "Explain the mechanism." Clive's response was a soft chuckle, his shoulders maintaining that casual slouch despite the pain radiating through his body. "You wouldn't understand. Music isn't a mechanism, it's a soul made audible." The overseer's multifaceted eyes flickered, processing this incomprehensible concept. In their rigid understanding of the universe, everything had a function, a protocol, a designated purpose. This human's music served no logical function, yet it was causing system-wide disruptions. "Your species will be silenced," they declared, their towering frame casting shadows across Clive's battered form. "Will we?" Clive's blue eyes sparked with that familiar defiance. His fingers tapped against his restraints. 3 beats, pause, 2 beats, pause, a pattern that seemed almost random but held deeper meaning for those who knew how to listen. The pattern was being picked up across the galaxy. On Kepler Station, a maintenance worker named Zrix found themselves unconsciously tapping the same rhythm against their tool belt. Their supervisor, a hulking Gorvak with arms like industrial pistons, paused in their eternal cataloging to cock their massive head at the sound. "What is that pattern?" the Gorvak rumbled. Zrix's gill slits fluttered nervously. I don't know, it feels familiar." In the agricultural domes of Harvest World Prime, the alien sympathizer moved carefully between the transport tubes, spreading something more precious than seeds. In whispered conversations with fellow workers, they shared fragments of the human song, teaching others the melody that made their whiskers still with wonder. "The music speaks of things we've forgotten," they murmured to a gathering of laborers during the rest cycle, "of choice, of joy." The word hung in the recycled air like a foreign concept. Joy, not contentment, not satisfaction at completed tasks, but pure, inexplicable happiness. The Empire had protocols for productivity, for efficiency, for order, but joy? Joy was uncharted territory. Back on Earth, Missy detected the first signs of Imperial countermeasures. Jamming frequencies designed to disrupt her broadcast were being deployed across the Outer Rim colonies. But she'd anticipated this. Her fingers flew over her equipment, implementing adaptive algorithms that shifted the signal just out of phase with the jammers. "They're learning," her technician observed, his hazel eyes wide with a mixture of fear and admiration. "So are we," Missy replied. Her confident stance never wavered, but inside she felt the weight of responsibility. Clive was counting on her. Earth was counting on her. The Empire's response was swift and predictable. The broadcast was officially designated as Seditious Audio Pattern Sigma 7, and all Imperial citizens were ordered to report any exposure immediately. Cleansing protocols were implemented: white noise generators, harmonic scrubbers, anything to purge the infection from their communication networks. But it was too late. The symphony had taken root in ways the Empire couldn't comprehend. On industrial platforms and research stations, in the deep mines and the high orbital farms, beings who had never questioned their existence began to wonder, what if there was more? In his cell, Clive heard the faint echoes of his melody bouncing back from across the galaxy, distorted, translated, interpreted through 100 different physiologies and cultures, but unmistakably his. His lopsided grin widened as he realized the truth. They weren't just broadcasting to the Empire anymore, they were teaching the galaxy how to sing. His fingers continued their rhythm against the metal wall, each tap a note in humanity's growing symphony of rebellion. 3 days into the broadcast, the impossible was happening across the galaxy. On Mining Colony 447, production hadn't just slowed, it had transformed. The Zephyrian workers, their elongated heads swaying in unison, had begun singing as they worked. Their supervisor, a rigid Empire-appointed Nexus-class android, found its vocal processors attempting to replicate the haunting melodies. "Explain this deviance," it demanded, its optical sensors flashing red with confusion. The lead miner, a being whose species had forgotten their name 3 centuries ago under Imperial rule, paused in their drilling. For the first time in their adult life, they looked their supervisor directly in its mechanical face. "We remember music," they said simply. In her bunker, Missy's screens painted a picture of controlled chaos spreading across the galaxy. Her sharp gray eyes tracked signal propagation patterns that defied every model of information theory. The music wasn't just being transmitted, it was being transformed, each alien species adding their own harmonic interpretations to Clive's original symphony. "It's beautiful," whispered her technician, his usually gruff demeanor softened by wonder. His grease-stained hands had stopped their constant tinkering, instead moving in gentle rhythm with the harmonics flowing through their equipment. "It's evolution," Missy corrected, but her voice held the same awe. She was witnessing something unprecedented, an entire galaxy learning to express emotions the Empire had spent millennia suppressing. The alien overseer paced the observation deck above Clive's cell, their bioluminescent joints pulsing erratically. Every report brought more impossible news. Agricultural Dome 23C had somehow increased productivity while its workers sang. Research Station Gamma Prime had submitted a formal request to study the acoustic phenomenon for potential applications. Most disturbing of all, 3 separate patrol ships had reported their crews infected by the melody. "It's spreading through our own fleet," they hissed to the communication array. "How do we combat an enemy that exists in sound waves?" Admiral Vextar's response crackled with static. "Find the source! Silence the human permanently." But Clive, despite the bruises flowering across his lean frame, had never been more defiant. His blue eyes burned with the knowledge that his music was working, that somewhere across the galaxy, beings were discovering what it meant to sing for joy rather than duty. "Your move," he said to the overseer, his voice rough but unbroken. His fingers tapped their eternal rhythm. 3 beats, pause, 2 beats, a pattern that had become the unofficial anthem of resistance. On Harvest World Prime, the alien sympathizers' courage had grown with each passing hour. No longer content to whisper in shadows, they stood atop a storage container in the main agricultural dome, their small form barely visible against the artificial sky. But their voice, inspired by Clive's example, carried to every corner of the vast space. "Listen," they called out, their whiskers trembling not with fear but with excitement. "The humans show us what we were before the silence." The gathered workers, dozens of species united only by their shared servitude, raised their voices in a harmony that would have been impossible just days before. Some hummed, others clicked, a few produced sounds that had no names in any Imperial database. Together they created something that transcended language, transcended species barriers. They created hope. The Empire's response was as swift as it was predictable. Enforcement squads were dispatched to restore order, their plasma weapons and sonic suppressors designed to end any gathering of more than 3 beings. But as they arrived at facility after facility, they found something that their training had never prepared them for. The workers were smiling, not the mechanical expressions of satisfaction that followed completed tasks, but genuine expressions of joy. The enforcement squads found their orders growing harder to follow when faced with beings who radiated happiness instead of fear. Several squads requested additional clarification on their orders. 2 simply failed to report in at all. Missy detected the Empire's escalation through her network of hidden sensors. Troop movements, communication blackouts, the telltale electromagnetic signatures of weapons charging. They were preparing for systematic suppression. "They're scared," she realized, her fingers pausing over her audio device for the first time in days. "We're not just disrupting their communications, we're disrupting their control." Her technician looked up from his repairs, his angular face creased with worry. "So what do we do?" Missy's answer came in the form of action. Her hands moved with renewed purpose, implementing the protocols she'd hoped never to use. Deep within Earth's communication networks, dormant programs awakened, preparing to transform the planet's entire infrastructure into one massive broadcasting array. "We give them something to really worry about," she said, her gray eyes reflecting the glow of her screens. In his cell, Clive felt the shift before he heard it. The metal walls began to vibrate with a familiar frequency, Missy's work, amplified beyond anything they'd attempted before. His lopsided grin widened as he realized what she was doing. "You magnificent genius," he whispered. The alien overseer's mandibles clicked in alarm as their facility's sensors detected the surge. The human's music, already spreading through their networks like a virus, was about to receive the kind of amplification that could reach every corner of Imperial space. "Impossible," they hissed. The planet's entire surface couldn't generate that kind of signal. Clive's response was to lean back against his restraints and begin singing again, his voice joining the growing chorus that stretched across the galaxy. His blue eyes fixed on the overseer with quiet confidence. "Want to bet?" The revelation hit Missy like a lightning bolt through her neural pathways. She'd been analyzing the signal propagation for the 100th time when she noticed it, a frequency buried so deep within Clive's symphony that it was barely detectable even to her sophisticated equipment. Her sharp gray eyes widened as the implications crashed over her. "You sly fox," she whispered, her fingers dancing over her audio device with renewed urgency. Hidden beneath the melody, woven into the very fabric of the musical patterns, was a frequency that resonated with the quantum crystalline matrices that formed the backbone of Imperial communication technology. It wasn't just music. It was a virus designed to exploit the fundamental physics of Empire infrastructure. Her technician looked over her shoulder, his grease-stained hands forgotten as he processed what he was seeing. "Is that—" "Harmonic disruption targeted at Imperial tech specifications," Missy confirmed, her voice tight with excitement and terror. "Clive embedded it in the composition itself. Every time someone hears the song, every time it gets retransmitted, it's introducing chaos into their networks." She immediately began amplifying the hidden frequency, her equipment straining as she pushed power levels beyond safe parameters. Across the galaxy, the effects were instantaneous and catastrophic for Imperial operations. On Command Station Apex 7, Admiral Vextar's scaled hide paled as their tactical displays began flickering. Communication arrays throughout the fleet started producing static bursts that somehow managed to sound melodic. Navigation computers began calculating courses to planets that didn't exist, but whose coordinates followed musical intervals. "All stations report status," Vextar commanded, but the responses came back garbled, mixed with fragments of human song. In his cell, Clive's subtle grin became a full smile as he felt the station's systems responding to his hidden frequency. The lights flickered in rhythm with his tapping fingers, and the air recycling system had developed what could only be described as a swing beat. His blue eyes sparked with triumph as he met the alien overseer's increasingly frantic gaze. "Problem?" he asked, his voice carrying that low melodic quality that seemed to make the very walls resonate. The overseer's bioluminescent joints flared in panic as they processed the scope of the disruption. Their facility's main computer was attempting to compose poetry. The security sensors had begun tracking movement patterns that spelled out musical notation in three-dimensional space. Even their own implants were feeding them harmonic analysis instead of tactical data. "What have you done?" they hissed, their mandibles clicking in rapid, agitated patterns. "I gave the galaxy permission to remember what it used to be," Clive replied, his casual slouch never shifting despite the magnitude of what was unfolding around them. The hidden frequency was more than just disruptive. It was transformative. On industrial platforms across the Outer Rim, manufacturing equipment began producing components in patterns that followed melodic progressions. Mining equipment carved tunnels that, when viewed from above, resembled sheet music. Even the Empire's most advanced AI systems found themselves composing symphonies instead of military strategies. The alien sympathizer felt the change most acutely. Standing in the agricultural dome where they'd first dared to sing openly, they watched as the automated farming systems began to plant in patterns that would, when the crops grew, create living musical staves across kilometers of farmland. Their luminous eyes filled with what their species had no word for, but humans called tears of joy. "The machines remember, too," they whispered to the gathering crowd of workers who had come to hear them speak. "Even the Empire's own tools long for music." On Earth, Missy's equipment was approaching critical overload as she channeled more power into the hidden frequency. Her wiry frame was taut with concentration, every muscle focused on maintaining the delicate balance between maximum amplification and complete system failure. "The arrays are overheating," her technician warned, his lanky form hunched over temperature readouts that were climbing into dangerous territory. "We're pushing beyond design limits." "Then we push harder," Missy replied through gritted teeth. Her confidence never wavered, but sweat beaded on her forehead as she fought to keep the broadcast stable. The Empire's response was immediate and desperate. Every available enforcement ship was redirected toward Earth, their orders simple: destroy the source of the transmission at any cost. But as they traveled through space filled with the contaminated signals, the ships themselves began to change. Navigation systems plotted courses that traced musical phrases through three-dimensional space. Weapon-targeting computers began calculating firing solutions based on harmonic intervals rather than tactical necessity. The ship's AI systems, designed for maximum efficiency, found themselves composing increasingly complex variations on Clive's original theme. By the time the enforcement fleet reached Earth's outer system, half the ships were broadcasting their own versions of the symphony instead of jamming signals. The alien overseer made a desperate decision. If they couldn't stop the source, they would eliminate it permanently. Their finger moved toward the control that would flood Clive's cell with lethal radiation. But as they reached for the switch, their own systems betrayed them. The hidden frequency had penetrated even their personal implants, and suddenly their multifaceted eyes were processing the beauty of mathematical relationships between harmonic intervals. Their mandibles, clicking in what should have been rage, instead produced sounds that resembled percussion accompaniment to an invisible orchestra. "Impossible," they whispered, but their voice carried a musical quality that would have been alien to them just hours before. Clive's lopsided grin widened as he watched his captor's transformation. "Music is mathematics made beautiful," he said, his blue eyes reflecting the flickering lights that now pulsed in perfect rhythm with his heartbeat. "And mathematics is the language of the universe." The galaxy was learning to sing, and not even the Empire's most advanced technology could silence a song written in the fundamental frequencies of existence itself. The Imperial High Command had never faced an enemy like this. In the sterile war room of the flagship Dominion, 12 species of high-ranking officers stared at tactical displays that made no sense. Fleet Admiral Korath, whose cybernetic implants had been designed to process 1,000 variables simultaneously, found their enhanced mind struggling with a simple concept. How do you fight a song? "Status report from all sectors," Korath commanded. their metallic voice carrying undertones that hadn't been there before, subtle harmonics that their implants were adding without authorization. The reports painted a picture of an empire in chaos. Production facilities across 17 systems had shut down, not from malfunction, but because their workers were too busy composing music to maintain quotas. The great mining ships of Sector 7 had formed an impromptu orchestra, their drilling equipment now producing precise pitch tones instead of raw materials. On Earth, Missy felt the weight of the galaxy on her shoulders as she monitored the Empire's response. Her sharp gray eyes tracked incoming vessel signatures, dozens of ships converging on their position, each one carrying enough firepower to turn the planet's surface to glass. Her fingers moved with desperate precision over her equipment, implementing countermeasures she'd hoped never to need. "They're coming in fast," her technician reported, his usually steady hands shaking as he rerouted power from secondary systems. "ETA 15 minutes. "Then we have 15 minutes to change everything," Missy replied, her voice steady despite the impossibility of their situation. She activated protocols buried deep within Earth's communication networks, transforming every satellite, every radio tower, every connected device into a node in humanity's greatest performance. The planet itself became an instrument, its electromagnetic field modulated to carry Clive's symphony to every corner of the galaxy. In his cell aboard the Empire station, Clive felt the surge of power as Earth's entire technological infrastructure joined his song. The metal walls around him vibrated with harmonic frequencies, and even the air seemed to carry melody. His blue eyes burned with fierce pride as he realized what Missy had accomplished. The alien overseer stood frozen in the observation deck, their towering frame trembling as competing impulses warred within their enhanced mind. Imperial programming demanded they eliminate the human threat, but the hidden frequency had awakened something their species thought lost millennia ago, the capacity for aesthetic appreciation. "Beautiful," they whispered, their mandibles producing soft clicks that somehow harmonized with the station's humming systems. But beauty was a luxury the Empire couldn't afford. Admiral Vextar's forces were converging on the source of the disruption, their ships bristling with weapons designed to sterilize entire worlds. The order came through on all frequencies: eliminate Earth, no survivors. The alien sympathizer felt the shift in the Empire's intent like a physical blow. Standing in their agricultural dome, surrounded by beings who had discovered joy through music, they made a decision that would have been unthinkable just days before. Their small hands moved to the communication console, their luminous eyes fixed on the transmission array that connected them to facilities across the galaxy. "Brothers and sisters," they began, their voice carrying farther than any of their species had dared speak in centuries. "The Empire comes to silence the song. Will we let them?" The response was immediate and overwhelming. From mining colonies to research stations, from agricultural worlds to deep space platforms, beings who had never considered defiance began to act. They sabotaged Imperial supply lines, disrupted communication networks, and in some cases, simply refused to obey orders. On Kepler Station, the maintenance worker Zrix made a choice that defined their species' future. When enforcement officers arrived to restore order, Zrix and their fellow workers didn't fight, they sang. Their voices, joined in harmony with Clive's melody, created something the enforcement officers had never encountered: sound as both weapon and shield. The sonic suppressors designed to break up gatherings found themselves unable to lock onto frequencies that shifted and evolved in real time. The plasma weapons that could level buildings hesitated before beings who radiated not fear, but joy. Several enforcement officers removed their helmets and added their voices to the choir. Missy detected the Empire's final approach through her sensors. Ships dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system, their weapon signatures painting space with the promise of annihilation. But she also detected something else. Many of the ship's transponder codes were transmitting in musical patterns, their crews having been transformed by the very signals they'd been sent to stop. "They're fighting themselves," her technician realized, his angular face creased with amazement as he watched the tactical display. "Half the fleet is refusing orders." The battle for Earth became something unprecedented in galactic history, a conflict where the weapons were melodies and the casualties were measured in the death of silence. Ships designed for destruction found themselves broadcasting symphonies across the void. Weapon systems that should have been charging began producing harmonic resonances that transformed electromagnetic radiation into audible beauty. In his cell, Clive began the final movement of his symphony, his voice joining with billions of others across the galaxy in a crescendo that redefined what it meant to be alive in the universe. His fingers tapped out the rhythm that had become the heartbeat of rebellion, and his blue eyes held the absolute certainty of someone who had seen the future and found it worth singing for. The Empire had taught the galaxy to be silent, but humanity had taught it to sing. And in that moment, as his voice rose to meet the chorus of an awakening galaxy, Clive knew that no matter what happened next, they had already won. The song would outlive its singers, echo through generations yet unborn, and remind the universe that some things, hope, joy, the simple act of expressing one's soul through sound, could never be conquered. The alien overseer's hand hovered over the controls that would end Clive's life, but their movements had slowed to match the rhythm of the music. Their multifaceted eyes reflected not the cold calculation of Imperial efficiency, but something warmer, something their species had forgotten they possessed: the capacity to choose beauty over duty. The Empire's response to the galactic uprising was as predictable as it was desperate. High Admiral Korath, their cybernetic implants now fighting a constant battle against unauthorized harmonic processing, activated the ultimate tool of oppression, the silence array. Built in the hidden shipyards of the Void Nexus, the massive construct was the Empire's final answer to information they couldn't control. 1,000 kilometers of quantum-locked suppression technology designed to create absolute silence across multiple star systems. If they couldn't stop the song at its source, they would make it impossible for any song to exist at all. "Deploy the array to Earth's system," Korath commanded, their metallic voice now carrying undertones that made their own bridge crew pause in unwilling appreciation. "Sterilize all acoustic frequencies." On Earth, Missy's equipment screamed warnings as sensors detected the approaching monstrosity. Her sharp gray eyes widened as she processed the readings. This wasn't just a weapon, it was the antithesis of everything she and Clive had been fighting for. The array didn't just jam signals, it created zones of absolute acoustic death. "It'll kill every sound on the planet," her technician whispered, his grease-stained hands frozen over his controls. "Not just our broadcast, everything. No music, no voices, no nothing." Missy's mind raced through calculations, her fingers dancing over her audio device as she searched for countermeasures. But the array was designed by beings who understood sound as a weapon, not as art. Traditional jamming wouldn't work against technology that could literally absorb acoustic energy and convert it to heat. "Then we don't fight it traditionally," she said, her voice tight with determination. Her confident stance never wavered, but inside she felt the weight of an impossible challenge. In his cell, Clive sensed the change before he could identify it. The air itself seemed to grow thicker, more resistant to vibration. The metal walls that had been humming in harmony with his music began to fall silent, their resonance dampened by fields that violated the basic physics of sound propagation. The alien overseer's multifaceted eyes tracked the array's approach with something resembling relief mixed with inexplicable sadness. The beautiful chaos that had consumed their station would finally end, order would be restored, and they could return to the comfortable predictability of Imperial protocol. But as the array's influence spread, something unexpected happened. The silence it created wasn't the absence of sound, it was the presence of emptiness. Where Clive's music had awakened dormant emotions in alien species, the array's effect was like watching colors drain from the universe. The alien sympathizer felt it first, their sensitive whiskers detecting the approaching void. In the agricultural dome where they had learned to sing, the air itself began to deaden. Their voice, which had grown strong with each passing day, began to falter as the array's influence crept closer. "The silence comes," they whispered to the gathered workers, their luminous eyes reflecting a fear deeper than anything the Empire's weapons had ever inspired. It would make us forget we ever had voices. But the galaxy had learned something in the days since Clive's first broadcast. Beings who had discovered music couldn't easily be made to forget it. As the array's zones of silence expanded, the response wasn't surrender. It was adaptation. On Mining Colony 447, the Zephyrian workers discovered that music didn't require sound. Their elongated heads swayed in visual rhythms, their movements becoming a silent symphony that spoke to something deeper than auditory processing. They began to dance the songs they could no longer sing. The crystalline engineers of Proxima Station found that their natural bioluminescence could be modulated to carry the patterns Clive had taught them. Light became their music, pulsing through their transparent bodies in waves that painted melodies across the spectrum. Even the massive Gorvac, whose species had never produced anything resembling music, began to communicate through precisely timed movements of their industrial-strength limbs. Their hammering and lifting took on rhythmic patterns that other species recognized as variations on humanity's theme. Missy watched the array's approach with the calculating intensity of someone solving the ultimate puzzle. Her equipment was being systematically silenced, her carefully built network of amplifiers and relays falling mute as the suppression field expanded. But her sharp gray eyes caught something in the readings that made her pulse quicken. It's not absorbing everything, she realized, her fingers flying over her controls. There's a gap in its suppression spectrum, subsonic frequencies below the range of biological hearing. Her technician looked up from his failing equipment, hope flickering in his hazel eyes. "Can we use that?" "Better," Missy replied, her mind already racing through the implications. "We can teach others to use it." She began encoding Clive's symphony into frequency ranges so low they were felt rather than heard, vibrations that could travel through solid matter and bypass the array's audio suppression entirely. The music would become tactile, transmitted through touch and resonance rather than air and sound waves. In his cell, Clive felt Missy's adaptation take hold as the walls around him began to vibrate with familiar patterns. Though the array had stolen his voice, it couldn't silence the rhythm in his bones, the melody that had become part of his cellular structure. His fingers continued their eternal tapping, now joined by every surface in the facility as the subsonic symphony spread through the station's physical framework. The alien overseer's confusion was palpable as their instruments detected the impossible, musical patterns propagating through solid matter, their facility becoming a massive resonating chamber that carried Clive's message through vibration instead of sound. Their bioluminescent joints pulsed in unwilling synchronization with rhythms they could feel but not hear. "How?" they whispered, their mandibles clicking in patterns that somehow maintained musical timing despite the surrounding silence. Clive's response was a grin that held the accumulated defiance of his entire species. Though the array had stolen his voice, his blue eyes burned with undiminished fire as he mouthed words that carried through the vibrating walls. Music finds a way. Across the galaxy, beings who had thought themselves silenced forever discovered new methods of expression. The song lived on in movement, in light, in the precise timing of heartbeats and the calculated rhythm of breathing. The Empire had created silence, but silence itself had become just another instrument in humanity's ever-expanding orchestra. The array continued its approach toward Earth, a monument to the Empire's belief that they could control the fundamental forces of expression. But they had underestimated something crucial about the nature of music. It wasn't just sound organized in time. It was the universe's way of proving that order and chaos could dance together. The silence array had transformed Earth into a realm of profound, unsettling quiet. The air itself seemed to grow thicker, more resistant to vibration. The metal walls that had been humming in harmony with Clive's music began to fall silent, their resonance dampened by fields that violated the basic physics of sound propagation. The alien overseer's multifaceted eyes tracked the array's approach with something resembling relief mixed with inexplicable sadness. The beautiful chaos that had consumed their station would finally end, order would be restored, and they could return to the comfortable predictability of Imperial protocol. But as the array's influence spread, something unexpected happened. The silence it created wasn't the absence of sound, it was the presence of emptiness. Where Clive's music had awakened dormant emotions in alien species, the array's effect was like watching colors drain from the universe. The alien sympathizer felt it first, their sensitive whiskers detecting the approaching void. In the agricultural dome where they had learned to sing, the air itself began to deaden. Their voice, which had grown strong with each passing day, began to falter as the array's influence crept closer. "The silence comes," they whispered to the gathered workers, their luminous eyes reflecting a fear deeper than anything the Empire's weapons had ever inspired. "It would make us forget we ever had voices." But the galaxy had learned something in the days since Clive's first broadcast. Beings who had discovered music couldn't easily be made to forget it. As the array's zones of silence expanded, the response wasn't surrender, it was adaptation. On mining colony 447, the Zephyrian workers discovered that music didn't require sound. Their elongated heads swayed in visual rhythms, their movements becoming a silent symphony that spoke to something deeper than auditory processing. They began to dance the songs they could no longer sing. The crystalline engineers of Proxima Station found that their natural bioluminescence could be modulated to carry the patterns Clive had taught them. Light became their music, pulsing through their transparent bodies in waves that painted melodies across the spectrum. Even the massive Gorvak, whose species had never produced anything resembling music, began to communicate through precisely timed movements of their industrial-strength limbs. Their hammering and lifting took on rhythmic patterns that other species recognized as variations on humanity's theme. Missy watched the array's approach with the calculating intensity of someone solving the ultimate puzzle. Her equipment was being systematically silenced, her carefully built network of amplifiers and relays falling mute as the suppression field expanded. But her sharp gray eyes caught something in the readings that made her pulse quicken. "It's not absorbing everything," she realized, her fingers flying over her controls. "There's a gap in its suppression spectrum, subsonic frequencies below the range of biological hearing." Her technician looked up from his failing equipment, hope flickering in his hazel eyes. "Can we use that?" "Better," Missy replied, her mind already racing through the implications. "We can teach others to use it." She began encoding Clive's symphony into frequency ranges so low they were felt rather than heard, vibrations that could travel through solid matter and bypass the array's audio suppression entirely. The music would become tactile, transmitted through touch and resonance rather than air and sound waves. In his cell, Clive felt Missy's adaptation take hold as the walls around him began to vibrate with familiar patterns. Though the array had stolen his voice, it couldn't silence the rhythm in his bones, the melody that had become part of his cellular structure. His fingers continued their eternal tapping, now joined by every surface in the facility as the subsonic symphony spread through the station's physical framework. The alien overseer's confusion was palpable as their instruments detected the impossible, musical patterns propagating through solid matter, their facility becoming a massive resonating chamber that carried Clive's message through vibration instead of sound. Their bioluminescent joints pulsed in unwilling synchronization with rhythms they could feel but not hear. "How?" they whispered, their mandibles clicking in patterns that somehow maintained musical timing despite the surrounding silence. Clive's response was a grin that held the accumulated defiance of his entire species. Though the array had stolen his voice, his blue eyes burned with undiminished fire as he mouthed words that carried through the vibrating walls. "Music finds a way." Across the galaxy, beings who had thought themselves silenced forever discovered new methods of expression. The song lived on in movement, in light, in the precise timing of heartbeats and the calculated rhythm of breathing. The Empire had created silence, but silence itself had become just another instrument in humanity's ever-expanding orchestra. The array continued its approach toward Earth, a monument to the Empire's belief that they could control the fundamental forces of expression. But they had underestimated something crucial about the nature of music. It wasn't just sound organized in time. It was the universe's way of proving that order and chaos could dance together. The colossal silence array loomed, a black disk against the distant stars, its edges shimmering with the destructive energy of pure acoustic nullification. On Earth, Missy watched its approach, her bunker now eerily quiet as the array's field began to dampen even the hum of her machinery. The air was thick, heavy, as if sound itself had become a viscous liquid struggling to move. Her technician, pale and sweating, pointed at the main screen. "It's at the orbital threshold. Missy, we have seconds." "Not seconds," Missy corrected, her voice a low, steady hum that vibrated through her own chest, a silent echo of the music she was fighting to preserve. "We have until it fully engages, and when it does, it won't just be sound, it erases." She knew the array's true purpose, to sever the connection, to make the galaxy forget the brief, beautiful moment of rebellion. It would erase the memory of the song by erasing the very capacity to experience it. Her fingers flew across the console, not attempting to counter the array directly, that was impossible, but to amplify the new subsonic symphony they had unleashed. Every building on Earth, every rock, every drop of water, every living thing was now a conductor for Clive's rhythm. She pushed the planetary resonance to its absolute limit, transforming Earth into a massive, living drum, beating out a defiant heart song that could be felt if not heard. In his cell, Clive felt the station around him tremble. The alien overseer, still mesmerized by the unintended harmonies their own implants were producing, swayed slightly, their multifaceted eyes wide with a mixture of terror and wonder. The silence was closing in, a crushing weight that threatened to extinguish the last flicker of sound, but beneath it, the deep, resonant thrum of Earth's counter-symphony pulsed through the metal floor, through the very bones of the station. Clive closed his eyes, focusing on that vibration. He didn't need to hear it. He felt it in his blood, a primal beat that resonated with the core of his being. He began to tap his fingers against his thigh again, a silent internal rhythm that echoed the planet's defiant pulse. Across the galaxy, the beings who had learned to sing in light and movement continued their silent defiance. On Mining Colony 447, the Zephyrians danced with increasing fervor, their elongated heads swaying, their movements becoming more intricate, more expressive. They moved with a shared understanding, a silent communication that transcended the void created by the array. The Gorvac laborers, their massive forms now moving with surprising grace, performed their tasks in synchronized rhythmic patterns, their heavy footsteps a silent percussion section to an unheard symphony. The crystalline engineers of Proxima Station glowed with an intensity that bordered on blinding, their bodies pulsing with intricate light patterns that conveyed complex melodies and emotions. The Imperial fleet, now fractured and confused, found itself caught between two impossible forces. The silence array, their ultimate weapon, was rapidly approaching Earth, its nullification field spreading like a deadly disease. But the ships themselves, many still broadcasting their own corrupted versions of Clive's symphony, were now vibrating with the deep, unsettling resonance of Earth's subsonic counterattack. Navigation systems flickered, weapon-targeting computers produced error messages, and the AI systems, already struggling with their newfound musicality, began to experience catastrophic feedback loops. Admiral Korath on the flagship Dominion watched their tactical displays dissolve into a chaotic swirl of colors and meaningless data. Their cybernetic implants shrieked with competing frequencies, the silence array's nullification battling against Earth's powerful, tactile resonance. "What is happening?" Korath bellowed, their metallic voice now a distorted, multitonal growl. "Why can't we silence it?" A junior officer, a species known for their meticulous adherence to protocol, suddenly began tapping a complex rhythm on their console. "Admiral," they said, their voice strangely calm, "the array, it is designed to suppress sound. But this is not sound, it is feeling." The alien sympathizer standing on Harvest World Prime felt the full force of the array's silence. Their whiskers drooped, their luminous eyes dimmed, and their voice became a barely audible whisper. Yet around them, the agricultural dome pulsed with the deep, resonant thrum of Earth's defiance. The automated farming systems, now planting crops in intricate living musical staves, vibrated with the same rhythm. The sympathizer looked at the gathered workers, their faces a mixture of fear and wonder, and then, with a renewed surge of courage, they lifted their small hands. They couldn't speak, but they could move. They began to dance, a slow, deliberate movement that mimicked the planting patterns, a silent prayer, a physical manifestation of the music that still lived within them. The Empire's final push was a desperate, uncoordinated assault. Ships veered off course, their crews overwhelmed by the conflicting signals. Some vessels, their AI systems fully corrupted, began to broadcast messages of peace and harmony, their weapon ports glowing with soft, multicolored light instead of destructive energy. Others, still under Imperial control, fired wildly, their plasma bolts dissipating harmlessly against Earth's newly resonant atmosphere, absorbed and transformed into harmless flashes of light. The silence array reached its closest point to Earth, its vast form eclipsing the sun. A wave of absolute crushing silence washed over the planet, birds fell from the sky, their songs abruptly cut short. The wind ceased to whisper through trees. Even the internal hum of the planet's core seemed to falter for a terrifying instant. In Clive's cell, the last faint echoes of the station's internal hum died. The alien overseer stood utterly still, their bioluminescent joints dark, their multifaceted eyes blank. It was as if their very essence had been muted. But then, a new sensation began, a deep, pervasive vibration that started in the ground beneath Clive's feet and spread through the entire station. It wasn't sound, but it was undeniably music. The rhythm of Earth, amplified by Missy, resonated through the very atoms of the Empire's technology. The station began to hum, not with the dull thrum of machinery, but with a deep, resonant bass note that vibrated through every cell of Clive's body. The alien overseer's bioluminescent joints flickered back to life, pulsing with the new silent rhythm. Their mandibles began to click, not in agitation, but in a precise percussive pattern that perfectly complemented the Earth's thrum. Their eyes, though still technically processing silence, seemed to see the music in the vibrations, in the subtle shifts of light, in the very air around them. On Earth, Missy watched as the silence array, instead of nullifying the planet, began to resonate with it. The colossal structure, designed to absorb all sound, was now being forced to amplify the subsonic symphony of humanity. Its dark surface began to shimmer, not with destructive energy, but with the subtle, intricate patterns of the music it was unwittingly transmitting. The array, the Empire's ultimate weapon, had been turned into the galaxy's largest, most powerful speaker. The tactical display on the Dominion's bridge, once a chaotic mess, now resolved into a single, undeniable image, the silence array, glowing with Earth's resonant energy, broadcasting a silent, tactile symphony across the entire Imperial network. Admiral Koroth's cybernetic implants, overloaded with the sheer beauty of the forced harmonics, finally shorted out, leaving their mind blissfully, utterly silent. The Empire did not fall in a blaze of glory or a cacophony of war. It dissolved in a wave of silent, pervasive harmony. The command structure, unable to communicate effectively through a network that insisted on composing symphonies, crumbled. The enforcement fleets, their crews either transformed by the music or simply refusing to fight, dispersed, many of them heading towards Earth, drawn by the irresistible pull of the silent song. Clive, still in his cell, felt the vibrations intensify. The door to his cell, once an impenetrable barrier, now vibrated with a specific rhythmic pattern. He recognized it, a familiar chord progression, a silent invitation. He pushed against it, and with a soft thrum, the lock disengaged. He stepped out into a corridor that pulsed with the silent, living music of the universe. The alien overseer stood before him, their form now radiating a soft, rhythmic light, their mandibles clicking out a complex, beautiful counterpoint. They extended a hand, not in aggression, but in a gesture of shared understanding. On Earth, Missy watched as the last of the Imperial fleet, no longer an enemy, but a scattered collection of silent, musical vessels drifted past their solar system, some settling into stable orbits, others continuing their journey, carrying the silent song to distant, uncharted sectors. Her technician, his face streaked with tears of joy, was now tapping out a complex rhythm on the console, his movements fluid and graceful. The silence array, still hovering in orbit, no longer threatened. It was a monument, not to Imperial power, but to the enduring, adaptable spirit of life. It was a testament to the fact that even in the deepest silence, music finds a way. The galaxy had not just learned to sing, it had learned to feel, to move, to glow, to exist in a harmony that transcended the limitations of sound. The Empire, built on rigid protocols and enforced silence, had been undone by the very thing it sought to suppress, the irrepressible, infinite creativity of the universe. Clive and Missy, the unlikely architects of this cosmic revolution, would go on to teach the galaxy not just how to make music, but how to live it. The story of humanity's first contact was not one of war, but of a symphony, a silent, vibrating declaration that echoed through the stars. The universe was alive, and it was finally ready to dance.